Hey guys, this is Hunter Levine, and thank you for listening to the Captain's Collective podcast. Brought to you by Skinny Water Culture, Turtlebox Audio, Florida Fishing Products, Costa Sunglasses, and Orvis Fly Fishing. In today's episode, we sit down with Captain Justin Leake, host of Chasing the Sun, and learn about his life, fishery, and things that he's learned from decades of guiding and filming. In this podcast, Justin shares about the key building blocks to understanding a fishery and patterning fish, mistakes that people make early on in their careers, and how he has built a business to target multiple species for people at various levels and skills. If you love this show, help us out by subscribing and sharing with others. Your support goes a long way. Also, make sure to follow along on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date. Also, to learn more about Captain's Collective, head to captainscollective.com, as well as learn about our opportunities to travel with us as we record the show. We hope you enjoy. Thank you for listening. This is the Captain's Collective. Awesome. Well, hey, Justin, thanks for driving over today, hanging out here in Destin, Florida for the Skinny Water Culture Red Drum Classic. And, man, grateful to finally, I don't know, we've probably talked 2 or 3 years trying to set it up. It finally worked out.
I know, I'm kind of offended. You had Brett Martin on here twice before I got on here.
Well, to be fair, he's not as busy. So,
oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
man. Looking forward to it, man. I love having guys who do different types of fishing, with the bay boat. And this whole zone is a beautiful fishery. It's known for putt-putt and water parks, but man, it's a really cool place. A lot of diversity. Beautiful, scenic water, and so really every time I come over here, I always have a lot of fun, and I like seeing different people who are kind of running things, that maybe look a little bit different from my zone. So, and we were just talking, you share a boat slip next to former guest Kyle Pitts. And, yeah, man, I love it over here. Just give me a little bit of rundown about what you do and kind of what your setup is.
Yeah, well, I'm based out of Panama City. I was born and raised there in Panama City, and I fished kind of such a variety. I got into the fishing business doing offshore stuff, working on a private boat, and so I really leaned towards that offshore stuff early on. And, I grew up as a kid fishing anything I could. Whether it was, ponds in the neighborhood, bass fishing. I think so many people get into fishing like that. But I really covered everything. And I think that reflects, and we can go into that later if you want, but that reflects on how I guide. I guide everything. If you look at not just the shows that we film, but mostly that reflects my guiding too. Anything like today was trout and redfish. And we had a great morning today. Sight fishing and blind casting trout and redfish. But within the past year, we'll do anything from a little bit of blue water stuff, blackfin tunas, wahoo, sailfish, stuff like that. And these are some of this is on guide trips on my boat. And obviously a lot of reef fishing stuff because this area, Panama City, Destin, Pensacola, has tons of really good reef fishing, natural reefs, artificial reefs. For a variety of different species. And then on these white sandy beaches, although they seem to be somewhat like a desert, you find these little pockets of life. And when you do, it's a lot typically. You're not going to see 2 or 3 redfish. You're going to see a school of 200. And it's really neat in that crystal clear water to be able to sight fish those big groups of fish. So I guess my childhood and the variety of different styles of fishing I did kind of shaped how I guide, which is basically just opportunistic. Depending on the time of the year, what the weather's like that day, I am willing and happy to go chase down about anything that swims.
Yeah, the more that I travel around and go to different fisheries, the more that my tone starts to become, let's just do what's good, because after you've done it a while where you have a certain itch that you want to scratch, but you keep forcing it and you're with the guide or you're with somebody and they're thinking, man, I just wish this guy wasn't so obsessed with this so that we could go and just do what the day is giving us and opens up. And the more that I travel around, it gets me outside of my box. It does remind me of being a kid where I didn't have kind of some of the relationships with the fishing or the type of fishing that you get a little bit older and it's, you lose some of that if you're not careful. And I think there's something really good to being able to do a variety of fishing, especially, man, if the weather's terrible. It's like, hey, do you want to catch fish or do you want to see something that maybe is really unique here? I really enjoy that. Do you do everything out of a bay boat?
I do. Well, that's a loose term.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this new animal that I have built, but I built a 27 conch.
Okay.
And it was like this dream of mine. First off, I am obsessed with boat building. I'm obsessed with boats. I was a kid that, like, literally as a 5-year-old, I would be in our backyard swimming pool dragging a piece of styrofoam around, looking at the wake coming off the back of the piece of styrofoam, and then I would reshape it and see what the wake looked like, you know, and then I'd put a tear a RC car apart and start putting motors on that little piece of styrofoam and driving them around the swimming pool. I've just always been obsessed with that. So the boat I now fish off of, my wife's going to laugh when I say this, but this is the last boat that I will ever put together.
Yeah.
Because I have a bad habit of buying just a bare hull from whatever company I feel has my dream hull, and then I rig everything myself.
Yeah.
And that turns into these projects that are labor intensive,
multi-decade projects.
Yes, they're long, they're expensive, they're hard. That hull that I now have, I ordered 3 years ago. It was about a 3-year wait to pick the hull up, and when I built this thing, because I do such a diverse style and types of fishing, it's impossible to have a boat to do all that. And I've been bad in the past about just having 4 or 5 boats to try to do everything. And some days, like, I get to the dock and I have one boat behind my truck, and I get there and I talk to the people, you know, because that is one thing that I really try to do is I try to take my agenda out of every day. I know what I would love to go do, but that's my career. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to make somebody's dream come true. And sometimes we have a plan, we've talked about it, they want to go do a certain thing, like let's say they want to go sight fish redfish, so I have my little skiff there, and then it's a dad and his son, and then I realize in the first 5 minutes, like, these people don't understand what sight fishing reds on our grass flats in Panama City is like. It is very technical, it is very difficult, and I think, man, if I had brought my bay boat, I know a perfect spot right here on this tide on this day where we could go catch all the redfish they wanted. They'd had a blast. So I've found myself in that position where I felt like I had the wrong boat for that day. So I basically have decided to build this boat that I wanted to do everything on. And that way, every day I have the tackle and the gear on that boat to do anything you could dream up, from blue marlin to redfish and everything in between. And in a weird way, I feel like I accomplished it.
Yeah. So
and
it's a 27-foot conch.
It's a 27 conch.
Okay.
It has a bracket on it, which lets you do a transom live well. And then I have a single Yamaha XTO 425 on it.
Okay.
It's got a full tower on it. It's got a Seakeeper gyro stabilizer on it. Which is just mind-blowing what it's like fishing in the tower. Like today, we're on the beach, and it was actually kind of rolly on the beach, and like we're up in breakers on the beach, and like you don't move, like you're not rocking, like there's literally a breaking wave smashing into the side of the boat. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, I've seen it. You know, I was at ICAST, and they had it demoing, and you're like, I understand it, but it's kind of something you want to see in person and check out.
Imagine stepping off the dock onto the side of your skiff and it pushes back. Like, it doesn't dip down.
Yeah.
It's like you're stepping from one dock onto another dock.
Yeah.
It feels weird at first.
How wide is that? What's the beam
boat
on that?
is 9.5 foot wide. So it's already a really wide boat for that size boat.
So that's like super comfortable. I mean,
it's a Cadillac.
Yeah.
And that's what I built it for, you know? I mean, I'm 42 or 3, 2-ish. Yeah, 2. You know, and I'm not getting any younger, and I'm a lifer. I'm not, you know, this isn't a project. This isn't a career that I've dabbled in. This is what I'm going to do till I can't do it anymore. So I thought, you know, right now, why not build that boat that you're comfortable on, that you can work the rest of your career on?
Yeah.
And you know, those sound good in your head, and I did that about 5 or 6 years ago with a 25 Dorado, which was an awesome boat. Did a lot of the stuff I needed to do well, and I tried to go all in on that boat, and then you find shortcomings, and you know, I felt like I was going to have to give up things, give up one thing to gain something else.
I imagine that's a lot more tippy too.
Yeah, it was, and it has less dead rise, so it would float a little shallower than my conch probably. Not really.
What is your conch float like?
Just a foot and a half.
Yeah.
Basically, if you have enough water to cover the trolling motor up really well, it'll float in it. So that's kind of my guideline. And that's why I don't know that I've ever owned an actual flats boat. Yeah. I've had a bunch of different skiffs, a bunch of different, light technical skiffs. And then I jump immediately up to bay boats because I've always felt like there's a size range of boat where they're small, they're 17 to 20 feet, let's say.
Yeah.
But they're heavy, they don't pole real well. You're using a trolling motor exclusively. So if you're going to do that, why not jump up to that bigger size range of boat 100%. Where you're comfortable,
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those down here.
Yeah.
In particular. I mean, a lot of old, Hughes redfishers and things like that. And, I mean, they don't have a tower. My dad runs a Parker Big Bay, 23 Parker Big Bay. My youngest daughter's named Parker. I mean, that thing's a tank, though. I mean, it is slow. It is heavy, but it's comfortable. Yeah. And we have the tower on it. And in fact, he bought it from a guy out of.
Was it here?
Yeah.
In Panama City?
It was.
Yeah. I knew that boat very well.
Yeah.
That actually inspired one of my builds. I had a 23 Parker SE. And I did a full tower on it, and
he bought it out of here. The guy used it for cobia fishing, and
I know that boat.
And it's been a great boat. It's held up really well. And I feel the same way because I have a 17-foot spear, and the thing legitimately floats 5 inches.
Exactly.
And it's super quiet, but if it's all those big trade-offs that we were talking about. At some point, do you want to be in 5 inches, or do you want to be comfortable?
That's it, and that's why I've always done that. Where I keep a skiff like that'll pull extremely shallow.
Yeah.
I love a little tiller skiff. Right now, I have one with a 25 tiller on the back, and I love that boat because it's a different tool. Yeah. It doesn't overlap what my conch does, and but outside of that poling in, let's say, under 10 inches of water, this conch does everything else. And like I said, I thought I was doing it with my last boat, and but you always find these things you wish you had done different. But it's actually a weird feeling to feel like I actually did it.
Yeah.
My entire life I've chased this boat that does everything, and the more I run this thing, I get excited every morning to go jump on it and take people fishing, and because it's so comfortable and it does everything so well except for burn fuel. It does that exceedingly well. It burns a ton of gas.
Yeah.
It's not very fuel efficient.
Yeah, I can imagine, and we'll have you on the podcast after you build your next boat in a couple of years.
Yeah, well,
we'll put a little audio splice of you saying that you would never do it. No, I'm just kidding.
It could happen, but maybe they'll give me one day.
Might get an itch. But man, when we were talking on the phone too, you were talking about you kind of had started focusing on tarpon on fly, and then you moved more towards live bait. And it's interesting that you said kind of learning how to focus on the client. I was in the Keys and I interviewed Nick Labidi, and he was talking about the same thing when he first had started. He was, he would pick these people up and then he would go chase what he wanted to chase, or it might even be what's good, but that client might have really wanted to catch a shark. I mean, they might be from Tennessee or Wisconsin or wherever, and all they dream about, they watch Shark Week, and now you're out there and you're putting them on tons of tarpon. Well, they're kind of bummed because they paid that money to go chase a shark, and learning that dance of, okay, how do you keep your clients at the forefront, and how do you focus on their needs and also still love what you do? And there's a lot of tension to that. Give us the walkthrough of how you got into guiding, and then how you got into the perspective that you're in that is a little bit different than a lot of the guys that I've interviewed.
Okay. Back to the tarpon thing, that's kind of a funny story. We'll start there.
Yeah.
The first tarpon I ever caught was with Brett Martina, and I don't think he could drive yet. He was either 15 or maybe 16 years old, and we had actually met duck hunting over in Appalachia back when it used to be really good over there. It's kind of not quite what it was, which is true for a lot of things, but it is funny. And me and Brett had started duck hunting together some, And I had been dabbling with these tarpon out here on the beach, and just couldn't really figure it out. And I was just trying to fly fish them. I don't know why I had this. Well, I do know why. I had my best friend's uncle. It's funny. He used to fish down at a Carabel like in the late 70s.
Wow.
And I mean, literally before anybody did it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had kind of intrigued me and my buddy Ricky with the thought of fly fishing tarpon. And I had, not really, back then, you're not watching it on YouTube. You're not really seeing much of it on TV.
Yeah.
It was kind of this mystery. And so when I was talking to Brett about duck hunting and stuff, he mentioned tarpon fishing down there. And he had just started to, matter of fact, I think he had like one fly rod, was just getting into it. And he was like, I know where we can go catch one. I'm like, all right. So I meet him down there one day. And sure enough, we didn't see a lot of fish. I think we saw 3 or 4 fish. And the first shot I got,
wow.
I see the fish. Brett goes, no, pick it up, go further right. And I'm like, I don't know what you're looking at. There was a pair of fish, and he didn't see the one I'm looking at. I didn't see the one he's looking at. I'm like, he's about to eat it, Yeah. And he's like, no. And I'm thinking, I don't know what, I'm not going to pick this fly up. And I'll never forget, it was a red and brown toad. And this is like right when the toad fly came out. And I was thinking, well, I knew Andy Mill had been tying them, like chartreuse and yellow, but Brett had this red and brown. It looked ridiculous, but the fish came up and just ate it. And I couldn't believe it. And I was like, this was way too easy. Anyways, he actually videoed some of it on some kind of video camera back then. It's on some tape Sony somewhere. Yes. And I don't know what happened to the footage of that, but I'd love to see that, because I fell apart, man. I couldn't believe it happened. And we actually got the fish up beside the boat. I grabbed them in the mouth and unhooked them, took pictures and all that, let them go. I didn't realize at the time that it was going to be a lot more bites before I grabbed another one. You know, I thought everyone that bit, you just grab a hold of them.
A little bit. I mean, that happens that happens sometimes. You take somebody out there and they don't realize, they're a client or they're somebody who hasn't, because you never know, like your relationship with the fish. You can go out and, spend years chasing certain species, and just between the weather, depending on like a tarpon, you might jump some, you break some off, whatever. And you could just have some guy just go out there and first cast.
I know.
It's funny that you say that too about him not seeing that one, because today we were, kind of driving around here, and I remember when I was a kid, I got a opportunity to hunt Eglin Air Force Base, and my dad used to be a game warden back in the day over in Crestview, Florida kind of area. And we were slip hunting for deer, and we had a group of does come in, and me and him were sitting on this tree, and I shot a deer, and he was like probably, or it was actually a doe. She was probably, I kid you not, maybe 20 yards away, maybe closer, maybe less. I mean, very close. Mm-hmm. The closest I've ever shot a deer with a rifle. And my dad was like, how did you miss that deer? And I was like, I didn't miss that deer. I had like shot her in the neck. Yeah. I mean, she was like real, but he was looking at a totally different deer. And sometimes when you're in
he was probably looking at a giant buck.
Yeah. He was like, that 12 point. No, that wasn't like that. It was a group of does. But yeah, I mean, even today, like me and Vince were fishing together, and there was a couple of situations where there's so many fish. I'm trying to I'm on the pulling platform, and I'm like, no, go now. And he's the same thing, like just looking at a different fish. And that's a good problem to have, though. That's usually a good sign but good for you for trusting your instincts too.
Yeah, at that point, I just didn't care. I was like, I don't know if we're going to get in trouble for catching this fish right here, if this is like a protected one or something. Yeah. But I know that I had spent already, probably 2 or 3 years, avidly trying to catch a tarpon on a fly. And the fact that, we had just got there, I could take you within 10 feet of where I hooked that fish at too. And I don't even know if anybody really fishes that area anymore. Yeah. I think it was a little popular for a little while, but that was kind of before the reef took off at Lanark. And then once that kind of all took off and got popular, everybody started fishing over there more. But it was just, it was wild, the fact that he was trying to coach me something else, and you're in the zone though.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you're saying, like, you got something in your scope, you got a deer in your scope that you want to shoot, like, you're focused. And I can remember it's so vivid how your memory can see the fish, watch him come up. Like, he thought he snuck up on that thing.
Yeah.
And that's when it clicked for me. Like, I've been trying to, like, force feed these fish. I've been so aggressive with them.
Yeah.
And watching that fish and his body language, and he watching him slowly sneak up under that fly, and then once he got within about a foot of it, just attack. I was like, I need to make the fish think that he snuck up on my fly or lure or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I got started with the tarpon deal, and I was already guiding at the time, so that was kind of like my side fun. I was not guiding tarpon stuff. I think that's one mistake I see a lot of guys make today is they get into guiding and start doing things that they haven't really perfected yet, that they don't know really well yet. I guarantee you this summer in the Florida Panhandle, there are some guide out there that's running tarpon trips that may have not ever caught one himself. And, to me, that's kind of a shame, because I feel like we're all going to have tough days. When I have a tough day and my clients are, bummed out because we didn't catch what they thought we were going to catch, I want to know, I can always go back to the dock, hold my head high going, hey, this is a fishery that I know intimately, and I have spent, decades learning and focusing on. And a lot of times those days that don't work out, I've tried to push them to something else because I almost knew it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
But regardless, I'm not going to say, I told you so. I'm going to suffer through that loss, that we didn't accomplish our goals that day. But I always feel better about it knowing it's something that I've spent years and years learning.
Yeah.
And that's how that tarpon deal was for me, was I was guiding doing other stuff for my real job. And then I was learning that in the background, kind of on this side as my own fun. It was my own hobby, basically. And I guess I've always done that, where I go through cycles where you just obsess over different things. And I don't get tired of it once I feel like I got it figured out, but I feel like I just add it to the list.
Yeah.
It's just another tool in the bag, kind of. And that way, when the conditions are right for that thing and it is the right time of the year to do that, I feel like I can jump out there and go do it.
Yeah. So for you, did you start guiding after college, high school? How did that all shake out?
Okay. So I graduated in 2000 from Mosley High in Panama City. Well, it's technically Lynn Haven, but Panama City. For the rest of the world that doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
It's so funny over in Bay County. It's like Panama City Beach. Like, nobody else knows the difference, but we call them all different things.
Yeah, but internally they'll make a big deal about it. That's like Atlanta. Everyone's from Atlanta. No one lives in Atlanta.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyways, right after high school, I went to Gulf Coast, and which is our college in Panama City, not the beach, in Panama City. And then I actually went to Florida A&M. And the whole time I was in college, and I did finish and get a degree, but the whole time I was in college, I knew I was just doing it to please my parents. And I mean, it sounds bad. I hope no kids listening to this are going to follow what I say, but I thought it was going to be a waste of time. Looking back, it was not a waste of time. I learned so many things about life, business, that it was worth it, but I knew I could have got a degree in, chorus or
what did you do?
Landscape design.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And my dad owned a big landscaping business. My grandfather had a nursery in Panama City, like way back when.
Okay.
And when Panama City first started to develop and build condos out here, when it first started blowing up in like the 80s and 90s, I guess, my dad's business really grew into this big landscape company. And so I knew it was a safe bet. And he had told me, hey, go get a degree in this. You can do our design work and come work with us. And so I knew that was the safe bet, and it made sense. But I didn't love it. I didn't even really like it,
Yeah.
And I've always been so into outdoor stuff, hunting and fishing, that I knew it was either going to be a problem in my life and cause relationship problems, financial problems, or I was going to figure out how to make a living doing it, and then it was going to be a benefit in my life. And so I shortly after school, after college, worked with a civil engineering firm, which is so funny looking back. I was literally taking clients of that firm that we were doing land development for, taking them fishing. Like, I was looking for a way while I'm at this legitimate office job. Anyways, to make a long story short, I knew that wasn't going to last long, and it didn't. And in the early 2000s, like 02, 03, I was actually working on a private boat part-time, and we started fishing all these tournaments along the Gulf Coast. So I started traveling, fishing on there. And the guy that ran the boat was only a couple years older than me. He was a really good friend of mine, Chris Gardner, and who shaped a ton of what my guide career looks like now, as far as the boats and the rigging. And like, I keep a neat boat, probably one of the neatest guide boats in the world, and that's because of him. My tackle is always like, pristine. Like, I like people to look at my tackle and they go, man, this stuff looks like it's probably never been used before. Mm-hmm. And I want to go, yeah, that stuff's 3 or 4 years old and it's been on thousands of charters. Yeah, but it looks like that. Because anyways, so I was lucky to work with a friend of mine who is also, at that time, was a very experienced private boat captain. He had run multiple different boats, and he really taught me how to take care of customers on the boat and how to take care of a boat. And that sounds simple, but a lot of people have boat problems because they don't maintain them right. I have a replacement for everything. I have a lower unit sitting in my garage for this XDO. I have replacements and spares of everything. I have, just a trolling motor rigged, ready to go, unplug it. I can swap my trolling motors out in 30 seconds on my boat. All those things I learned from Chris on the private boat. Well, when I first got into the private boat world, again, this is probably like 03, I think. Because I was working on there when I got engaged. And maybe in 02. If Angie, my wife's listening, sorry. These years are close. I have a horrible memory. I remember events, not timelines. Yeah.
It doesn't mean it hasn't been a good run.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
You've been enjoying it so much you hadn't really.
Well, that's true. It has flown by too. I can't believe that was like 20 years ago. But one thing that I noticed was when our owner had friends and family or clients in town that we were supposed to carry offshore, if it got rough and we couldn't carry them, I'd carry them bay fishing, because that's what I like to do on the side. That was, I worked offshore for money. I fished in the bay for my own pleasure. I grew up on North Bay, not on the water, but on a little canal that flows out into the bay. So we could take a john boat or a, canoe or a pirogue or something and paddle on out to the bay. We had a bunch of really small boats, and that's how I honestly got into red fishing. It was just available. It was easily accessible as a kid. But so on those rough days, I started carrying people bay fishing. And, they tipped me good, and I'm thinking, man, at that time, there was not really anybody doing stuff like that in Panama City. Mm-hmm. There were a few inshore guides, but it was mostly all live bait fishing. And it was just simple. It was, fish the jetties, live shrimp. It was simple fishing, and I liked that technical aspect of sight fishing, fly fishing. I always, if I was fishing myself, I was fly fishing, and it didn't matter if it was freshwater, saltwater. I was always obsessed with casting a fly rod, tying flies. I've always liked those types of activities where even when you're not on the water, you're still immersed in that activity of tying flies, playing, and getting ready for the next day. So after a short period of the private boat thing and working with my dad some, and which I'm thankful for today because it did teach me some business sense, I decided to jump into the inshore guiding world in the early 2000s. And I created a website, and it was going good. I had a young family, and it was intense. It was a lot of pressure because my wife was working part-time at the time. She was in school as well. she's got like 20 degrees now. So she spent like the first half of our married life in college. So I was providing most of our income by guiding. And that's where this transition started, because I went from this like very specific, fly only, redfish tarpon only for about 3 years. And then I realized, man, I'm in Panama City, or Panama City Beach, and you have millions of people coming through here every year. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't running as much as I needed to. Mm. And at that time, there weren't booking services or really any other way other than you promoting yourself to get your name out there. There was no social media. It was just a different world. It was like the Wild West, and you had to find your way on your own, which I think was great. It called a lot of people out, and you had to work your way into it. And I wish it was still like that. Mm-hmm. But so that's when I said, hey, I know the other game, the spin and tackle, live bait, and I have nothing against it. I really enjoy every type of fishing. I really do. And that's when I decided, what, I need to get a bay boat again, start running some of that. And that's when I kind of went into the multi-boat game and quit trying to talk people into doing what I wanted to do. And this way, every call I got, instead of saying, hey, I carry 1 or 2 anglers, I do this and this, if you don't like that, then sorry, call my buddy. And I would send those trips off to other friends of mine that were bay boat fishing, like Kyle. Mm-hmm. And he's always done the 2-boat game, which is smart. That's what fits that market. Mm-hmm. So anyways, we got into that kind of doing everything deal. And a few years into that, it was 2009, and I know because our logo has it established 2009 in our little logo. Me and 5 other friends that were full-time guides in the business of mine, I said, look, why are we all trying to self-promote separately? Why don't we just start a little business together? Yeah. And so that's where we started our Panama City Inshore, and we all got slips by each other. At the time, a lot of us were running off trailers and stuff, and we turned it into a full-blown operation with an office, ice machine, bait freezers. We got our own like shrimp tanks to keep bait in. We really set it up to be like a full-blown guide outfitter, and that started in 2009, and we hadn't transitioned a whole lot since then.
Yeah, I've been out there to that area, and it's well located too. I mean, there's all sorts of great things around it, so it's easy for clients to get to. It's easy for them to leave and get to a restaurant, go meet up with the family, whatever it may be. And one of the things I was curious about, just kind of hearing your story, is I'm curious, when you're thinking about a lot of guys, like it's the kind of conventional world and the fly world, what do you feel like the conventional world, what would be your argument for someone in the conventional world to do fly fishing, and what would they get out of it, and vice versa?
I don't know that you can tell somebody why they need to do the other than go try it, and I think when you try things, you learn to appreciate why people do it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's a bunch of comparisons. I mean, fly fishing's tougher. I don't care what you say. I mean, there's always going to be some spin fishermen try to argue it, but it's not an argument. Mm-hmm. Fly fishing is a lot more technical, and it is very tough. To me, it reminds me of the conversation that I've heard so much lately about crossbows versus compound bows. There's so many states that have so many laws, and there's so much money spent lobbying for laws for crossbow hunting, against crossbow hunting. Like, I'm totally not against crossbow hunting. If you want to hunt with a crossbow, great. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. But should you be allowed to hunt with a crossbow during regular archery season? I personally don't think so, because shooting a compound or a recurve bow is way more complicated than shooting a crossbow. You're purposely handicapping yourself with a fly rod or with a vertical bow and arrow, and you're pursuing game or fish, and it's just 2 different things. So I think spin fishermen should try to fly fish and at least appreciate the difficulty of it. And I think a lot of fly fishermen could benefit from getting out there with a spinning rod and seeing, what? Yes, it doesn't look as cool. My Instagram post is not going to look as cool if I'm sitting here holding a spinning rod and they know I caught this on a live shrimp. But you know what? It's fun.
Yeah.
Catching fish is fun. That's one thing I've learned. Like, I mean, I fish, out west trout fishing, and I used to be pretty snobby, and pretty much if I couldn't catch a trout on a dry fly, I thought nymphing was kind of, overrated and cheating, basically. I mean, it is compared to dry fly fishing, but it is effective. And when you start catching them doing that, you go, it's still fun. It is different. It's easier, but it's fun.
I think it's about trying to learn about as much as you can about that certain species. And there's certain things that, in order to have success, if you're bow hunting or if you're fly fishing, you got to get closer and you got to see better. I mean, you got to, well, not with hunting, you need to always see well, but with fly fishing, for 90% of the time. But the fun thing for me is, so my dad is, he's semi-retired.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll ever really retire. He kind of kept a handful of clients, but, my dad does a lot of live bait, and then I was personally chasing a lot more on fly, and then now my 7-year-old is getting into fishing. Well, there'd be certain creeks or certain things, and I'd be like, man, this creek's loaded up, or like I'd be noticing when fish were coming in the creek, and like, oh, we need to be in this creek at this tide. Well, then my 7-year-old wants to go out, and I'm like, okay, well, if I was going to fish in this creek at this point in the tide, if we get there a little early and we anchor up right here and she's got a shrimp out, then she's going to catch those fish coming in or whatever. And so you're kind of learning some of that. And the same with my dad doing tarpon. He was fishing for tarpon in places that guys don't fly fish because they can't see as well there. And you can learn a lot by that too. Like, you can learn, oh wow, a lot of these fish are way deeper, or so it's kind of neat too, as far as I think both of them you have their pros and cons. You're able to learn certain things that you might have missed. And the redfish, it's like, well, where does that redfish go? I know they're here in this tide, but I have no clue where they're at in this point. And then the live bait guys are like, or spoon guys are like, guys who throw the gold spoons, man, they're like, oh, I love super high tide on the grass. And you're like, I hate that.
Yeah, they could be anywhere up there.
Yeah. But so it's like there's always these little things that teach you a little something about where they are, what they're doing, what they're feeding on, etc.
Yeah, I think when you're on the other side, it's always easy to look at the other people and go and think that that's easy. I think that's why it's important to try different things with an open mind, because I think a lot of fly fishermen, if you handed them some live bait and sent them out in the bay, they may spend all day out there and not catch a fish. And they go, well, I guess it wasn't quite as easy as I thought it was. You can't just sling this thing out there, count to 10 and then set the hook and there's a fish there. It can be very complicated as well in a different way. And something you said earlier really stuck out to me, and this is just an example of how we look at things from two different perspectives. You were talking about, when you're fly fishing, you have to get a lot closer to them.
Yeah.
Or I relate that to bow hunting, obviously. I think most people would, like, why do you bow hunt? Well, it's kind of fun. It's more intimate. We have to get a lot closer to them. Or do you learn how to shoot your bow 100 yards? Do you learn how to cast a fly rod 200 feet? And then you go, well, that defeats the purpose of why you were doing it. Or does it? Because it's a new challenge, We're and in all reality, that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
we're looking for a new challenge.
There's a casting contest today if you're going to cast 200 feet. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, what if somebody could?
Yeah.
Then would that not be fun to fly fish if you could cast 200 feet?
Well, I love today I was on the boat with Vince, and I love fishing with Vince. I don't get to do it a ton. And Vince is an incredible angler, and it doesn't take much for me to be the worst angler on the boat. But
whatever.
I mean,
I don't.
It's pretty fun to like. There's something exciting about it, because the fact that you can miss, and it just makes it a little more exciting. Like there's this, even if you don't catch the fish, but you got the shot, it still feels really good. And the anticipation of, okay, we spotted it. Here he is. All right, he's coming. Up, you cast up. Oh, you nailed it. You got the shot, or you blew the shot, and we're all laughing, depending on who you're fishing with, But, that, to me, I like the excitement of that. I like the fact that I mess it up sometimes. Whereas, if I'm sitting there, and I love doing this with my 7-year-old, like, and trust me, she messes. It was so funny. Last night, I brought some spinning rods just in case for us fishing tomorrow, and I had to go and take it off and go in and start picking all the line out, because my daughter, she's actually can cast a spinning rod pretty good, but she struggles with the slack thing, so she's getting all that line under the spool.
Man, that's tough.
And then you got to go in there and take it out.
Are you fishing braid on there?
Yeah.
Okay, I was about to say light braid, and then don't fill the spool up very full. Yeah. I have kids too, and that went a long ways when they were young. Like, because I like to pack my spools just slam full.
Yeah.
So it'll cast
You're
further.
asking for it.
Oh yeah, you're talking about wind, not city.
Yeah.
Just cut your losses, pull half the spool off, and then they're good.
But for the most part, if me and you go out there, and I still like catching fish too, and like I said, I try to just say we're getting ready to go to Costa Rica, and it's like I like to be like, man, let's just do what's good. What excites you? I want to go. Yeah. But like if me and you are sitting out there and we got a shrimp under a cork and I catch a nice fish, you're not going to be like, man, you nailed that, Hunter. I mean,
you got
it's
me.
A circle hook.
That's
it's
true.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, or maybe it's not circle hook. Maybe we're a little sporty. We got a kale hook or something. I don't know, but
at least you get to set the hook there.
Yeah,
it looks cooler.
It's cool on video. But no, I mean, and so I think there's a lot with that. Let's talk a little bit about, so as somebody who chases a lot of species, I've had people, and recently I've had more people who are multi-species guys, but, I've interviewed my fair share of guys who really focus in on one thing. What do you feel like are the big building blocks that, regardless of the species, like whether you're chasing redfish or tarpon or pompano, cobia, fish in the reefs, pelagic, whatever, like what are the big building blocks that you see that, like, these are the foundational things that apply across all?
I think a lot of times people try to overcomplicate each species. I think learning when species are going to be somewhere and why is important. And typically it's going to revolve around bait migrations, water temperatures, a few factors like that.
Do you log all that, or you just kind of just keep it in your head? You just
I
look
do
at
in my
it
head.
Yeah.
Let me tell you too, a wonderful tool, because I do not log anything. I wish I could. I'm just not a writer. I'm not a reader either. Which I wish I liked to read. I just don't. I listen to podcasts like crazy. I like to hear other people talk, but I just don't like to read. But anyway, so I don't write down a lot of stuff. But it's so funny how people's memories work, because I have like the worst memory in the world. I mean, I can't believe I remembered to drive over here today. I had like 10 alarms set just to make sure I didn't forget. I really wanted to be here, but most things, if I don't have like a bunch of alarms or somebody reminding me to be somewhere, I forget. So as forgetful as I am, if I can see a picture, I remember where that fish was caught. I remember what the tide was doing. I remember who it was that caught it, what they caught it. I remember every detail of a picture. So I find myself using my Google Photos like crazy as my logbook. And I can go back, luckily, because I've been this weird person that has never had an Apple product in my life. So every picture I've ever taken since my first smartphone has been backed up to this Google account. So it's got like, I don't know, 15 years worth of Google Photos on there. And so I can go back and look at this day for the last 15 years and see the pictures of fish that I took on the boat and remember every detail about it. So I use that a lot when either I'm planning a trip to go target something specific, or if I'm in a struggle. If I'm in a slump and I'm like, man, I don't know anything about fishing. What am I doing here? I start going back and looking at those years past, and I can learn so much from that because I remember the events of that day and what I needed to do to be successful. I know not everyone has that tool. So if you were going to look at targeting all these different species, I would, rather than just trying to call and get reports, because reports change quickly, I would look at those simple things. All right, if we want to go target a cobia, I know that 65 to 80 degrees is his preferred water temperature. I know in the past, although the past few years kind of stunk, in the past, we have this migration through the panhandle at, this time from late March through early May. I'm looking at those like facts that I know I can count on that. I'm not going to find a cobia in 40-degree water. Maybe I do. I don't know, but they don't around here.
Yeah,
but
somebody's uncle 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Probably up the East Coast somewhere. Yeah. So
but
generally, I'm looking for those, pretty hardcore specific facts about that species why they are in certain places at certain times, and that's going to give you so much to go off of. You know, whether it's a tarpon migration or like even our redfish that we fish out on the beach. I mean, there's very specific times of year. You know, when conditions aren't right, you're not going to catch them. So I'm looking for a few simple things, and I try not to stray far off that. It's easy to get sidetracked and go, all right, well, if that don't work, we're going to try to fish these other 10 things. You know, spend some days out there, pick a target species, know what you're going to look at. Know that they're going to be there at that time, or that they could be there at that time. Yeah. Don't chase a ghost.
So you're talking about, and I have some friends that are at this point in their guide business where, you know, you kind of have the thing that you feel comfortable taking people out on, and then you start to kind of dabble or learn something yourself. And then I have a friend right now, his name's Evan Snow, and he's out of Perry, Florida. Great guide. I love fishing with Evan. And he's starting to kind of develop different types of fishing stuff. And then what he talks about is he's like, look, you know, some of my buddies, they're firefighters, so they firefight and then they guide, right? And he's like, some of my buddies, they teach and they guide. He goes, I do trout. Like, he'll go out and drift for trout. He's like, that's my firefighting. He still likes doing it, you know, but then he's got this thing he's building out. He's almost in his mind a separate business. And he learned some stuff himself and then kind of fun fished it. And then that fun fishing got to the point where he felt like, okay, now I learned enough that I can justify somebody spending their hard-earned money out here. When you're in a situation, let's just kind of create a hypothetical and say that there's a species that you don't currently guide, but you really want to. What is that process going to look like for you to try to get there?
It's identical to what you just described. I thought you were telling my story when you just said that, because again, that's how I got started in the tarpon guiding. Was nobody guided tarpon up here back then, and I didn't, you know, I was trying to learn it when I first started fishing with Brett. So I was guiding other things that I knew I could be successful in, fisheries that I understood and knew. And that's never changed, where I always have this, because it's always changing. You know, our fisheries change every year. You can be bummed out because something that you like to do is not going to be as good next year. And 10 years or 20 years from now, it might not exist at all. You can be bummed about it, or you can do like I do. And one of my greatest joys fishing is finding that next thing. Yeah, I love that. You know, you're looking for this undiscovered.
Do you have one right now?
I do.
Do you want to say it?
Talk about it? Yeah.
Yeah. What is it?
No, it's chunkin' wahoos.
Okay.
It sounds ridiculous, but like we used to go chunk fish at the rigs for yellowfin tunas. In a lot of my guide career, I've done it snapper fishing. It used to be like top secret. Yeah. You know, we'd catch these giant red snappers in really like 3 miles off the beach, and it was all chunk fishing. And, you know, just taking whatever you have left over frozen bait and cutting chunks and just drifting them. And it's probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I was sitting there chunking snappers on a charter, had like a 70-pound wahoo just swim up beside the boat and start eating my chunks. And so I start feeding them to them. And then put a chunk on a hook, obviously, and we caught them. And I've repeated that. I try not to post too much about it, but, you know, not that I don't want people to know about it. It's just I don't understand it that good yet. So I don't want to act like, oh, look what I can do, because I'm going, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I want to figure out why it doesn't work. So I have been dabbling with a little bit of that. I always have a project that I'm working on.
Yeah. We started playing with hogfish this year,
man, and I've seen a little of that.
It's pretty fun because, like, you know, I was actually interviewing Ryan Harrington out of Tampa. In Tampa, there's guys there that are a little further, not a little, they're a lot further in that realm. And then my dad was all interested, so they're all talking about it. And, you know, it's kind of, I think it kind of keeps, you know, there's this, like, not to get too scientific, but this idea of like neuroplasticity, like how your brain is basically, it's actually good for you to learn languages and try new things. Like it's like working your brain, keeping that muscle, you know, where it's strong and it's able to adapt. And, you know, I think in fishing, it makes sense, right? Like it keeps you excited, keeps you humble. You know, you get that excitement of like putting together the puzzle pieces, so you're not just running milk routes or whatever all day.
Yeah, I can't. I could never do that.
Yeah, it's funny. Today we were looking, you know, and I haven't caught a pompano on fly. I haven't really tried. I keep saying I'm going to try, and then I get caught up doing everything else, you know. And I'm trying to actually, I'm kind of similar that like I'll kind of fixate on something and learn a lot about it. And then I'm also trying to release myself and say, hey man, if you're not excited enough to go do it a ton, that's all right, man. Just, you know, it'll come. And, you know, it's kind of fun to play around. I've caught plenty of pompano on like sand fleas and, you know, fish bites and all that stuff. But, you know, it keeps it like, makes it kind of feel like you're still exploring, and you might be, you know, 15 minutes from your house, but you're doing something completely new. And I think that's definitely a huge theme that I've seen. Even guys who are super big on one species, they always have their little,
well, sometimes they're experimenting within that species too. They're looking for that species in a new location. They're looking to fish them at a different time of year. You know, me personally, I think I wouldn't say bored with the species, but I enjoy the transition every year. That's why I love living here. You know, if you wanted to tarpon fish all year here, too bad. You can't, you know, it's going to get cold. You know, so you're forced to transition to different things throughout the season. And I have a 12-month, you know, outdoors season here, and I love it because it forces you to keep moving and looking at different types of fish. And as we experiment and look for these new things, you know, the next discovery, it's not like once you figure it out, like you get bored with it. I may move on to something else. It's not because I got bored with it. It's because it's a new tool. I love to add it to my tool bag.
What's been the hardest one for you?
Oh, man, the hardest one. See, there's some that I don't want to talk about. So
that you're willing
I have this horrible task. We've filmed 9 seasons of Chasing the Sun, of our TV show. 13 original episodes a season. I don't know how many episodes that is, but it's over 100. All filmed, other than a couple we did at Key West, but we kind of got in trouble for it because it's supposed to be in Panama City Beach. So pretty much all of them out of Panama City Beach.
Yeah, it's in the Gulf, right?
Yeah, that's what. Well, we were in the Atlantic.
Oh,
well, we did permit fish on the Gulf side one day, so that was fair.
You know,
close enough.
A boat ride from the ramp.
That's right.
Still there.
Yeah, but it is kind of this weird task to make entertaining TV, but I'm a guide. You know, like I make my living, I feed my family and pay bills doing this. You don't want to give away everything. So as I'm thinking about some of the hardest things that were for me to figure out, there's a very few that I haven't put on national TV. And I can personally say, and you know, it's something that I struggled with early on, and I talked with other older guides in our area, like, hey, this show that I'm doing wasn't my idea. You know, I was hired by a production company to do it. The show was going to happen either way, with or without me. But like it's this, and I know now it's what a lot of guys experience with social media, is this double-edged sword of like, you have to put yourself out there, but you work so hard to discover these little niches, these little times, these little windows where a certain fish is doing a certain thing. It's really cool. And it's hard because if you keep it all to yourself and no one ever knows about it, what good was it, you know? And not just from a financial standpoint, but just I love people. I like being with people. I like sharing time with people. You know, like you shoot a big buck, the first thing I want to do is, you know, get back to camp and show some of my buddies this deer I shot.
That's like, always been my take on it is, you know, I mean, people always struggle with different medians, and I think there's great conversations about how to do that well. And, you know, I know guys like you care about that tension and preserving certain things, but there's also this sense that, like, you know, okay, there's TV shows and there's social media, but before that there was people writing articles and magazines and blogs, and before that there was just a guy running his mouth at the bar, and before that there was the guy that was a part of a tribe who,
that's right.
I mean, it's, so I think that, you know, there's always this legacy of storytelling, and everybody draws the lines a little bit different, and everybody makes mistakes too. I mean, they just, you know,
I have too.
You know, it's one of those things that it's tough because, like, I think that the conversation's good. Yeah, it's good to have, but there's some people who are always going to be upset. And, I mean,
well, and I feel like if somebody's always upset with you, you're probably doing it right, because there's somebody that wished that you had shown more, and they're upset with you
Yeah.
because you didn't show them exactly what to do.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's somebody that's upset with you because they think you showed too much.
Yeah.
And so I think if both sides are mad with how you showed it, you probably did it
right.
Yeah, as close
well,
as
it's funny
possible.
because, you know, I just did a round 2 episode with Flip, and I think that Walker's K is, from the people that I've interviewed, the amount of people who are like, I decided that like I could chase my dream and I could fish for a living, and I really, it's such a meaningful show that for so many people, and they love it, and it's like, but now nobody can do anything, you know, like people like nowadays it's like, oh yeah, like a TV show inspired me, changed my life, like gave me the courage to like pursue my dream, and like, but oh, like Justin shouldn't be having a TV show, you know. It's like, oh, no future, you know, no future use, no future generation. And it's always that tension, I think. And you know, I'm not an expert in it, but everybody that I've interviewed battles it to some extent. And there's some irony in like, oh, we want to keep things, you know, hey man, I want to keep this thing a secret. Well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I take people to go do it.
I know.
I mean,
yeah.
Okay. So there are people who are like, I fish by myself. I fish with my 2 friends my whole life. I'd never post anything. I don't, you know, and it's like that guy's probably got a lot more weight, but it's like when your job is to take people out and put them on fish and show them stuff, and then you're mad that somebody else is showing stuff. Well, they're showing a bunch more people. Well, yeah, but you know, they didn't show the route to get there. They didn't show exactly where it was. Like, unless you're putting blindfolds on your clients and doing some circles around and you know. But I think that everybody cuts those lines. For you, what's been the most meaningful part of having the show? Like, what's been the most, because you got approached to do it, decided to do it, 13 seasons in. How's it helped you and impacted you?
13 episodes a season. We're 9 seasons.
Oh,
we're actually
seasons
just starting next week. We're going to start filming season 10.
Okay.
The most meaningful part of the show would be connecting our community as much as more than I ever realized it would. Everyone in our community, or I say everyone, okay, most everyone in our community is a big fan of it, more than I ever thought it would. I thought it would be kind of controversial, again, because, you know, I'd like try to show a little, but not too much, and don't want to give everything away. But the community really got behind it, and that's what makes it worth doing. And we have so many people that own condos and beach houses, and honestly, there's a lot of houses on our bay that people are starting to buy up from out of town. And it's not really a bad thing. Like, I kind of, you know, I'm a local guy, and, you know, you always want, like, this is my water, you know. You don't want more people out there. But I try to show things in a way where other people will be respectful of our resources. There's never been a redfish kept on that show. That's another thing. When we started our guide service in 2009, that was like rule number 1. You know, we keep fish all the time. I mean, we run snapper trips, and, you know, we do plenty of meat fishing. But, you know, there's certain lines that we draw, and like the redfish was one of them. We were like, we're never going to keep redfish no matter what. None of our guides, ever.
So if you have a client that wants to keep fish, then you say, okay.
Yeah, we'll go do something else.
Yeah,
we'll go keep some mangrove snappers and flounder or something like that. And we're going to probably catch some redfish too, just because it's more fun than the rest. And most of the time, they see that value in, you know, hey, we can keep some food fish. But to me, the redfish's value is in the water as a sport fish. And if we, anyways, I'll chase a rabbit on that one. So I'm going to hold back.
You wouldn't be the first to make that case.
Oh, okay.
I think a lot of listeners probably.
Yeah. So I guess what I was going to get at was one of the biggest values of the show to me has been, as these people are coming in, there's people moving to Florida like crazy, and I don't blame them. I want to be here. Why wouldn't they want to be here? So instead of just saying, hey, good luck, you know, go figure it out, I get a lot of feedback from people that watch the show, and they are watching, they're learning the types of fish we have. They're learning a lot about it, not necessarily specific spots or where to go catch them, but they're learning about these fisheries that we have, but they're also learning how we use them, how we respect them. You know, we'll go meat fishing, and we may keep a few snappers, whatever. We don't have a limit. You know, we're catching mangrove snappers. And I go, all right, we got 4 people on here. We're not keeping 20. We really promote these hook and cooks. We have a lot of restaurants on the water. You can fillet a couple of fish at the fish cleaning table and walk in there, and they'll cook them up for you. And most people are starting to enjoy that type of experience, and it's a lot better for our fisheries because rather than just going out there and focusing on filling a cooler up, we're taking a little bit. It reminds me of how you would manage a hunting property or a private pond or something like that. We're going to take something that's not going to negatively affect the fishery. We're going to use it properly, and then we're going to still catch stuff, other things, and just let them go for fun. So I think the show hopefully is promoting a lot of this catch and release culture, like you have seen in bass fishing for so long. They've done so well with it. And I know a lot of inshore guides have done a good job promoting that. I tell you, though, I've seen a lot of our younger guides getting into it now that are keeping whatever, especially redfish, just boxing them up, and it drives me nuts. Like, man, we've worked hard and we've come a long ways trying to promote that. And so anyways, I think the show's been a good tool to help promote a lot of those conservation mindsets.
No, I think, too, like we see the power, like back to the Walker's Cay thing, the power that media can have on shaping the way that people see the outdoors. People are going to fish. People are going to move to Florida. I mean, it doesn't take a TV show to make people want to come down here. There's a bajillion reasons. And I think just saying, hey, rather than sitting in the back and becoming the old guy who gripes, use your voice.
That's it.
I think that's a huge component. And my last question is, if thinking about you at Florida A&M, and that's kind of like over in the zone that I live. I live south of Tallahassee, but you're at the beginning of it. What advice would you give yourself?
I'm going to get in trouble for this. First off, I have some of the best Christian parents that raised me in a wonderful home. I love them to death, and I owe most any type of success I've ever had in life to them. But the one thing that, and I don't blame them, this is, every generation is different. College was so important to them. And there is still parts of my business that I see and different skills and a maturity level that I developed working in a professional environment, although it was a short period of time. And I do appreciate that. And maybe I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for that. But I do still think I knew what my road was. I knew what my goals were. And right out of high school, I probably should have just started guide fishing. Because everything else in between that gap was just like a roadblock. It was something in the way. So I would say, like, if you really know what you're here for and what your plans are and where you're supposed to be in life, it doesn't matter what it is. If you're a musician or an artist, I think a lot of times you feel like, especially when you grow up in a very normal, middle-class family, you're just expected to do certain things. Both my parents graduated from Florida State. My wife graduated from Florida State. Like, you're like, you feel like you're supposed to fit into that. But the only thing that I would have done different, I think I would have maybe had a little meeting with the family and said, look, I'm thankful y'all all have this path, but that ain't my path. And let me tell you what my path looks like. And I can tell you what, when I quit my professional job to start guiding full-time, my mother was devastated. She thought I was crazy. And she was not happy about it. And that broke my heart, because I wanted to make her proud. And she'll often tell you now, like, she's so happy I did this. She's so proud of my fishing career now that, I think she would even agree. She never saw the dream that I had, when I was in high school, that, there was not another option for me. I was fooling myself. I was fooling them, thinking that the college game or the professional career deal was a possibility, and I should have just jumped straight into it.
And my advice, I've started to see a trend of that starting to become more normalized, I think, because of the amount of money that goes into sending a kid to college. If you're young and you don't want to go to college and you want to start a business, whatever, photography, fishing, I don't know, whatever, I think the best way to go about that then, if you want to have that conversation, is show them you're serious. And so find somebody, buy some books, listen to some podcasts, whatever you're into, and come up with a real business plan so that you can sit down and say, hey, here's how I'm going to do it. And I met some young guys that are photographers, even the guy who's with us this trip, who, you know, the philosophy is if you have a business plan and you know what you're not just, you know, drinking every night, waking up, fishing, calling it a business, you know. But like if you have a business plan and you bring it and say, here's what I want to do, here's how I'm going to do it, and rather than investing 30,000, 40, 50, I don't know, you know, however much into it, you could even be so bold to say, I'm so grateful. I understand college is important to you, but this is the business I want to do. Let me show you how it works. I've interviewed reach out to some older guides, say, tell them what you're doing. A few of them will probably sit down with you, talk to you about how the business works. And then I think that's really important, because I think a lot of parents just worry about it being a pipe dream and then they're going to derail and all of that. So to stand out, I think you can take that extra step, man. But that's really helpful, man. I'm grateful for the time. I want to come out on the boat, see it. I've definitely never been on a 27-foot Kong, so I'd love to do that, man. And just grateful for the time, and hope that people check out your show. And you know, we'll have to sit down again. We got some more to dive into.
All right, ready for round 2.
And Wahoo in your next boat.
Wahoo on round 2.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks.